Welcome to the Transactional Analysis Podcast, conversations about the theory, application and spirit of TA, brought to you in partnership with the United Kingdom Association for Transactional Analysis.
James Longwell here, and I'm delighted to be joined by Aaron as my co-host and our guest Beatrijs today. Aaron, given that this is your first appearance as a co-host, perhaps we could start with you, a little bit about your place in the TA world.
Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Ern Lam. I'm a PTSTA in the education field, and I am based in Singapore. And I'm really happy to be co-hosting this with James.
Wonderful. Thank you, Aaron. And now we turn to our guest. Delighted that you could join us today, Beatrijs. You're very well. I know that you've appeared before on the podcast, but this is the first time in a chance to have a direct conversation with you. We ask our guests whenever they join us, what is the path, or how did you arrive in TA? So introduce yourself perhaps in that way, and then we'll see where the conversation takes us.
Well, thank you, James. I was working in higher education a little over a decade ago when I was asked to pick a study, actually, and to say I needed to get a master's degree. I had my bachelor's, but to stay in the higher education, I had to get a master's degree. I was pretty involved in narrative work and being a drama therapist. I did quite some work with working with stories and the narrative approach. And so I looked to different modalities that were working with stories. And I came across TA, and I realized that some of the models were actually already part of my work. And I found them extremely effective. I didn't quite realize that the manuscript, that it was basic TA materials. But I dived into it. I had worked with Marijke Arendsen-Heijn here in the Netherlands, and she's a grand old lady in TA. She brought TA to the Netherlands. And I did my psychodrama therapy course with her for 3 years. And so I phoned her and I said, I think, Marijke, that you are also a TA professional. And she said, Beatrijs, this is like the moment, because we are looking for people that want to do a master's degree, and you'd be an excellent student. So we're going to make this happen. And then we kind of got off. She contacted TA Academy, where they were already starting, and I signed up with my good friend Frauk, and we started to do the masters. I signed up to become a master in TA even before I did a 101.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm struck by how many of those stories I hear in the TA world of how the first contact or the first introduction was made. And it sounds like you were given a wonderful stroke.
Yeah.
And what was it about TA that drew you further in? Because now you're grown in TA.
I guess the effectiveness. I've always been quite charmed by that theory can lead to change, and that concepts of how we understand the world describe something that is so helpful in a process of wanting to change how we are with ourselves, how we are with others, or how we perceive to be and to live in this world. So that really kept me into it. And I think there was also a personal thing that I enjoyed learning much, much more than I expected. So the whole studying and reading and writing about it was a sheer joy for me. And I had never had that experience. So I really dedicated 2 years of my life for 25 hours a week to sit in a room apart from my family and to study TA. Because I don't know, it livened me up. Yeah. And I could practice with my family and with my colleagues and with my friends, which was also very lovely. Well, at least at first, because there was also sometimes, when you do TA, it becomes almost a bit difficult, because I realized after a few years that I needed to resign my job. So I've been working for 17 years there, and then I thought, oh my God, if I really am okay with myself, and to be honest, to be okay with them, I shouldn't stay here.
And I'm mindful, both of you are in the education field, and what you were describing there, Beatrijs, was very much an educative and a development process. So I'd be curious as well if you could sort of say, how do you see and define the education field within TA?
I think the educational field in broad prospect, so to say, is a broad world. There's a huge difference if you work in primary education, or if you work even with smaller children, or if you work as I have always worked in adult education. There's quite a big difference. But the main thing, and I really like that about educational TA, is that I think Trudy and Giles and some others really have guided the principle of what is education for. So the whole idea that Gert Biesta is saying about what are we doing education for? What is it that is so important about what happens in education, whether it is in primary school or in secondary or in high school or on whatever level you are learning. So the whole principle, TA principle of people can change, I think is always, for me, an intriguing one, because I see that if you want to, you can. And education is a very good place to practice how you want to be and how you can turn up in the world and be you and not be what people expect you to be, or not be what you think you should be, but to really find the core of your being in the process of being in relationships with others. Yeah.
I find that such an uplifting description of education. And given that you are also in the education field, I'm curious what it invokes in you.
Well, it's very heartwarming, and I am also similarly inspired by Gert Biesta's work. So I think B and I have that in common. And I think just listening to you say that, Beatrice, my question then is, if I were to ask you, what is educational TA for, in your words? And what is the role of the educator in TA, in teaching TA? What would you say? What is your opinion on that?
So that's two questions, isn't it? Like, what is educational TA for? So let me answer that one first. So, well, I think that in general, in our society, we are not so typically led to become the persons that we want to be, or that the core subjectiveness that we have. I think that in many educational paradigms and many educational places, we are forced upon to become something that is compatible with society. So in one of the previous podcasts, it came across boys in schools in comparison with girls in schools nowadays, and how boys are maybe having more trouble arising into their subjective selves in the way that they are showing up in the world because of the feminine aspects of education. So, for example, sitting down and writing things and thinking about things, while boys want to run around, or I don't know. I'm raising 3 boys, so I always, sometimes I say they're like my little foxes, because they need to fight with each other, for example. But in primary school, they couldn't fight with each other because it would turn the teacher mad. And so there's something of, can you show up as your subjective self in education? And I really think that in educational TA, we've got some brilliant answers in that. So quite a lot of philosophy on how you can be a teacher, but also quite a practical way of understanding that my own schooling script and my own vision of education is coming from my experiences and is leading me into a way of connecting with students that is typically me. So there's a parallel in how we in educational TA wish teachers to show up in their subjective self, and that makes it possible for their pupils or children or students to get closer to that. What is this asking of me? How do I want to show up in the world? It's quite a lot of Biesta talk, isn't it? Like quite a lot of his things. Yeah.
That's part of the process of this conversation, yes. And it's interesting listening back to your own voice if we're getting a bit meta in our reflections. Yeah. Beatrice, I'd like to now ask you about like your current interests, maybe from research, your current work practices. Where are you taking your TA? So share with us a little bit of where you're at.
Oh, that's a good question. That's a very provoking question. I did my TSTA exam in November 2024. And before that, I must say that the 10 years in TA were very much about getting qualified. So part of my subjective self was really looking for qualification. I did my master's degree, I did my CTA, I did my TW, I became a PTSTA, and I started to collecting hours and to develop as a professional teaching and supervising transactional analyst.
I must just briefly pause because sometimes we have listeners who are not from the TA world. So if we could just explain what a TW is, because our listeners may not have heard that acronym before. Yeah. So just in like layman's language, how would we describe that?
It's a bit of a rite de passage of 3 days in which you talk and act supervision, teaching, philosophy of learning together with the others in a group. And there are some professional TA or qualified professional TA people around there who will guide you into that 3 days and who will, after the 3 days, will talk to you about, are you ready to become a provisionary teaching and supervising transactional analyst? It can be quite a brilliant and good experience to navigate for yourself and in company of others. What is it like to be a transactional analyst when I supervise and teach it? And what does it mean for me? So that's a TW, Teaching Endorsement Workshop.
And Ern and I have both been through the same process. And I know one of the things we talked about, linking it back to the education field, is, of course, if you're from a different field, this is the very first time you're really thinking about your educational philosophy, your development philosophy. And I'm of the strong view that we should be doing more to educate transactional analysts from other fields about how to approach the education role that they're about to step into.
I do think that another part of being in educational TA, and we've been doing that together also, Ern, is that we are in our community. As soon as you have done a TW, you will become a teacher. You will need some of that practical, but also philosophical parts of what is education for, and how is my training important for people, and what am I actually doing, with what effect. And I think that, well, we in educational TA have really got an answer for that, to be talking and to be sharing. So the canon of educational TA is quite valuable in TA itself. I just wanted to really express that.
Yes, and actually, Beatrice, just to jump in, I think in the work that we've done together, we've also seen people moving earlier into this conversation. So not only after they've done the teaching endorsement workshop, but even before that. So people are thinking as they prepare for it, what do we need? And
I took us down a little side alley there in that question. So I'm going to reconnect you to the question I asked Beatrice, which is, where are you taking your TA and your interest, and picking up from that place of having been on a journey to TSTA and now where you're at?
Yeah, because it brought me back to my exam, actually. And that in the preparation of my exam, I came across a book by Vanessa Machado de Oliveira. It's called Hospicing Modernity. And it really came together with the ending of qualifications for me. So I had been in a journey of studying and learning. And here comes this book. And she says, you know what? Actually, that idea of how you have behaved and what you have found so important for the last 10 years is actually coming out of modernity. And modernity is not fair. and it is full of paradoxes. And modernity has a very harsh and ugly side in the fact that we live in a world that is unequally divided in goods, and that I, as a Western white female, I noticed that I'm pretty preoccupied with my consumptions, to have the desires that I wanted, and that I was thinking, oh yeah, maybe if I shovel some money here, I can do another course, or I can do another thing that I want. But my wants are quite important, have been quite important in the whole of the journey. And because of what she wrote, so the undertitle of the book is Facing Humanity's Wrongs and the Implications for Social Activism. And it just sparked something for me. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is different. And it touches me that maybe TA doesn't have an answer to everything. And maybe that even in TA, we sometimes forget about the inequality, or we sometimes forget how complex cultures are, for example. So that really, I don't know, I make a movement like I had really turned my gaze into hospicing. And it's hospicing. My husband is studying to be a nurse practitioner, and he sometimes is really into the act of hospicing, is actually when people are in the last stage of their lives. How can you lead them into a good and soft departure? And what is needed in relationships that they have? And how do you think about what is next? Is there nothing beyond this world, or is there another world to be found? And I think that is hospicing for me. And I actually, just before summer, we decided to start a new project, my colleague Kat Cornthwaite and I, to be talking about hospicing TA, which is quite revolutionary, isn't it? I've just studied 10 years of TA, and now I'm done, and I'm starting to talk about hospicing TA. I think TA doesn't have an answer. It's not, the answer is not good enough right now. So the answers that we find in our humanistic psychology is not enough to give answer to the human wrongs or the complicity that I can feel as a human being sometimes living in modernity. So there's something about TA that is brilliant and interesting and fascinating, but there's also something that was right in the 60s of the previous century, but actually is not giving an answer right now. I think that's a fair question, and I don't have the answer right now. So this summer we did some workshops around it, and we talked with some people about which concepts would you get rid of if you are looking at the world today. So somebody said cure, somebody else said contracting. Somebody else said, I don't know about ego states. I think ego states is not helpful anymore. But in that conversation, I started to realize that it's not about getting the concepts out and getting some new concepts in. It's really about how am I in alignedness? How can I be aligned with the modern time, with myself and others, and how, I don't know, that's a bit of a maybe odd word, but
I'm loving this conversation for several reasons, Beatrice. So I'll name what I'm loving. The first thing I love is that TA does not have the answers. I have never subscribed that TA has all the answers, but sometimes when you're in the TA environment, you can think that it has, or you can there's a bit of a delusion that that's the case. And of course it's not. And so we sometimes have a difficulty with our boundaries about what do we let in from other schools of thought or philosophy or whatever, and what don't we? So that's a bit I love. And the other bit I love is it does remind me of an aspect of a lot of people I encounter in TA, which is let's keep provoking ourselves.
Yeah.
And what you're naming here is a provocation.
Yeah.
And I love that. I don't know if I want TA to die. Yeah. So if you follow hospicing through to its conclusion, I love the provocation.
Yeah. So I noticed myself while I was talking. So the hospicing, it's not bringing TA to an end, but the hospicing is what can arise if we are prepared to get rid of things that are not helpful anymore. So the only way, and that's what Vanessa Machado de Oliveira is describing, the only way that you can discover what can arise is if you do a very grounded, very solid, and very profound investigation about what it is right now that is coming out of modernity, but that in fact is complicit and complex and unfair. And so we've been struggling with exams, for example. So part of our exam processes are really unfair. So we are deeply rooted in meritocracy. And it's a question if we want to stay like that, or at least it's not even a question anymore. We know that change needs to come, but we don't know what kind of change we need and want. And the hospicing process is actually meant to put things aside and to really mourn about things that have been suitable for us, but that we no longer need.
Can I ask what could be potentially a provoking question? So you talk about hospicing TA.
Yeah.
But what about cultures or peoples who've not even known about TA? Who decides what to hospice?
Yeah.
It sounds like the people who are deciding what to hospice are the people who have been in TA. But what about the people who've never experienced TA and to whom some of our very old classical or maybe, well-known concepts are a revelation and inspiring?
I think that's brilliant. So even right now, the three of us could do an exercise, like a thought exercise. I don't know what to call it in English. We could say, so what are the basic principles of TA that we, for now, really want to hold on to? And if we have these, not even the philosophical stances that we have, but the principles that we think are very important, and then bring that to cultures in which they haven't heard about TA and talk with them about those principles and see what arises out of it, and maybe see whatever comes from that culture into that fits with TA or not fits with TA, to give us a clue about what we need to keep and what we need to develop. And we could do that together. We could say, what are the basic principles? Can we say two very important principles? And then which country would we bring that to, for example?
I've often reflected on TA's origin in 1950s, 60s California. So particular point in time, post-baby boomers, like massive growth of the US economy, but also persecution of people with so-called communist views. And then I think, and what about the rest of the world? No reflection of Africa whatsoever. No reflection of Asia either. No. And then I always have these conversations with Beatrice about how does TA sit in the Asian frame of reference? And what even is an Asian frame of reference? A Singaporean frame of reference, or a Chinese Singaporean frame of reference, or a Malaysian Singaporean frame of reference. Do you know what I mean? It's like it did start in a very Western, white USA paradigm.
So we wouldn't bring I'm okay, you're okay to that part of the world, would we? It's the principle I'm okay, you're okay is not that. It feels like it's more important for Western people in their search for autonomy than it feels like when I bring that into Asia or even in Africa, where they say, well, we already have that. We call it Ubuntu, and it's quite different from I am okay, you're okay. So I wouldn't bring that principle to the countries, maybe.
I'm thinking, sometimes it's also about, for me, the I'm okay, you're okay is what I really like about TA and Beatrice.
Don't hospice, I'm okay, you're okay.
Don't hospice that, I love it. And I wonder if we use different names for it. do we all have to use the same name for it? And so, for example, Ubuntu, if it has that slightly different color, can it still sit within the TA canon? Just different. It's just my take on it.
Yeah.
By the way, we'll put the author and the name of the book in the show notes, Beatrice, so people can
Thank you.
follow up. I want to come back to the word modernity. Before, in the preparation for this show, I'd never really thought about the word modernity at all. I asked an AI, obviously, for a summary of the book. Okay, all right. I hadn't thought of modernity in that way. So even that provocation was really helpful. And something I wouldn't want to hospice in TA is our fascination with language and how language and words get used and how different meanings they can have. Look at our conversation about okayness and how you can say a word, but it can have a very different felt sense or meaning. And so I'm not done with my exploration of what modernity means. And I don't know if I agree with the author, by the way, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So could you say a bit more about modernity?
So Vanessa is very, very provoking about modernity. And what resonated for me was actually the personal stories that she shared about her own family. And that resonated with my personal story, with my family. So there's something of my growing up in a little village, being one of the more rich people in the village, but also being from a Christian denomination in which we weren't part of the village. So we were different. So my sense of, I can't quite belong here is something that resonates with what Vanessa says, that quite a lot of people in the world feel that they don't have a place to belong because their country is exploited, their resources are being taken away, there's a war, and the only way to stop the war is to give away harvests of that country or the mining, for example. So there's something of not being, something in the don't belong that is part of our modernity, and part of our modern cultures that resonates with the very private and personal part of me. And hence, that's where I got triggered into, I recognize that. And it's important for me. And it's a struggle. Like, how do I deal with that in my daily life? How do I deal with that when I talk to my students, when I see supervisees? How does that come in our relationship forward?
Yeah. I was also struck about your comments around, preparing for your exam and getting to the exam and then being in a different place and having different considerations. And I'll talk for myself. I'm on the hamster wheel of the PTSTA process at the moment. And
that's it. It's a hamster wheel, isn't it?
Yeah. And I'm like, all right, well, where's my space to do this thinking? And like one of the areas I've looked outside of TA is into complexity theory. So I have a little bit of space to expand my thinking, and I'm a bit consumed at the moment as well. So what I love here, Beatrice, is that you're inviting us to think more broadly and to disrupt our frames of reference. And I do think that's a part of TA as well, that if we can put down the exam process and the hamster wheel, that we should do more encouraging of in whatever updated version of the exam process we have.
Well, I agree with you, but only for the people that have access to TA right now. I wrote in an article, it's not published yet, but it will be next year, that I quoted what Keith Tudor is saying, that you will need a year's income. I don't know, it's his, isn't it? You will need a year's income to provide for your TSTA journey. Yeah. So 1 year of your income will be needed in the 6-7 years that you are a PTSTA.
If you think about that, how much more in the run-up to becoming a CTA?
Exactly. And what does that mean for inclusion and exclusion? How many people that actually need a language and concepts that are about being equal, that are about how to be in the world and how to be with others, that will benefit them greatly? they don't have access to it right now. So there is something that modernity is providing, that if you are intelligent, if you have a certain amount of wealth, it's more accessible, or it is only accessible. And if you don't have that, if you are neurodivergent in a sense, if you are poor, you don't have that access in the same way. And we can really think about what the implications are for TA as a community, because we want, in 20 years, we still want TA to be alive. But as far as I'm concerned, it is possible that it will look quite different from what it looks like right now, so that we can give an answer to what does somebody like me is doing with somebody like you in a world like this, so that we can keep getting an answer to that question. But a contemporary answer, not something from back then.
And for the benefit of any of our listeners that were not at the Montpellier conference, this was something that was raised by several speakers, including Bill Cornell and Keith Tudor himself. Yes. And I really enjoyed their provocation around what does each subsequent generation do with TA. And I very much took away, it's not our job to maintain it in a fossilized state. It's our role to update it and make it fit for purpose for the society that we inhabit now.
Yeah. I'm sitting with the example of contracting. So contracting is such a core TA concept. But the contracting that we did in the course that we had in the Hospicing Modernity, we read the Hospicing Modernity book with 12 or 15 people. And we made a contract with them saying that engaging in this project may or may not have practical implications. And I agree to that. And I can feel uncomfortable and angry. And I have to find my own ways to deal with that as a tutor in this group and as a participant in that group. So it was such a different way of contracting for me to give these provocations about, I'm not going to deliver you anything that will lead to growth or rescripting or redecisions or anything. I'm going to confront you. And are you up for that? Are you willing to sit with me? And am I willing to sit with you while that provocation is actually taking place in your life? And it might have implications. And I quite like the sound of it and the work that is needed. I'm quite up for that journey, to be honest.
And I'm thinking, and what implications does that have? Is that something you think it's just unique to that project you did, or can this be something that is part of the TA learning process as we enter into TA as a new sort of trainee?
Well, I like what you said, James, that in Montpellier we got that invitation to think about this and to act on it and to not be blind, but to open up our eyes for what is possible for us. I think that it's quite part of TA for me right now. It's not like I don't have the feeling that I'm bringing in something new, but I do feel that with the language coming from Hospicing Modernity, there is a provocation that is quite strong and a bit delicious. Have you seen the film Up? Looking Up, of Don't Look Up? Don't Look Up it is, isn't it? It's about the meteorite that comes down on the Earth and it's going to destroy Earth.
Oh, yeah.
And everybody is discounting it, except for a few people who discovered the meteorite. And I love that film. I thought, this is it. This is the stage. This is where we are. It really speaks to what is needed. And there was something so completely simple. You can explain it to an 8-year-old. You can make a drawing out of it, I guess. Is that when the shit hits the fan, you will need people that you love to have a meal together. That's it. That's the conclusion of that movie, isn't it? Be with people you love and do the journey to figure out who is important to you and have a meal together. And that is, I would love it when TA has a principle of when we do TA, we have to have meals together. Yeah.
Yeah, great principle. Yeah. So, Beatrice, where would you like to take your work on this next? What ideas do you have about how you will take this forward?
I'm in the process of designing a proper course with Kat Cornthwaite, as I said earlier. Like, we did a book reading last year, but we want to have a course. So we're in the midst of designing that. And when we find people, the idea is that if we have done the course for a year about hospicing TA and about looking at modernity and TA, we will provide an online conference in which the participants of the course will provide workshops, etc., etc. So that's the idea. And then see what happens. So who do we get involved and write about it and see what's needed and maybe sing about it or paint about it, whatever. Go outside with it. And the other thing, I emailed you about this last week. There's a new book by Vanessa. And in that book, she has collaborated with AI in a specific way. So I feel now that I'm really advocating that specific way of AI. So it's a personified chat GPT. And it's quite brilliant because it doesn't expect you to ask straightforward questions, but it has something of a collaboration with each other. And it does give you provocations in which you can see, oh my God, you know what? I was looking through the lens of modernity. So I would like to, I don't know, it's quite new. I've discovered it a few weeks ago. So I don't know what I want with it, but I do want something with that.
Yeah, and it sounds like there's more coming our way, for the TA community in terms of your work in hospicing TA.
Yeah, it feels like my theme, which is quite exciting. I didn't know I was looking for a theme, but...
You didn't know you'd get your TSTA, and then here it would come.
Here it would come, yeah.
This next chapter. So if people want to connect with you, Beatrice, or ask further questions around this, just for the benefit of our listeners, do you have a website or you want people to email you? Whatever is, we can put all of this in the show notes.
I do have a website, but it's in Dutch. So you have to use AI to translate it, and it's not updated. So I made it once, and I've never revisited it again. So that's not the best, but it gives some information about who I am and what I've done. Some of my writings are there, etc. And you can always email me or find me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to be in contact with people who are triggered by what I say. And even if you want to, ask critical questions about it or say, I disagreed, or aren't you playing a game of some sort over there? I would be happy to be in contact about that. Let's get some fire in this discussion. I would love that.
Wonderful.
So, yes.
Wonderful. Well, there's an invitation.
Yeah.
And Beatrice, I'm thinking of any listeners who may know less about TA. What would you say to someone considering starting any kind of journey in TA or studying TA who, is right at the beginning of their exploration and discovery here?
That's quite a difficult question, isn't it? Because there's so much you can do. And it depends on what kind of person you are. You can start by reading a book about it. I love reading, so that's what I did. But I don't know, if you do a TA 101, some of them are very profound and beautiful. What do you want if you are interested? Google, I think, and see where the nearest TA professional is and see if you can find out something about her or him. And if you want to see if that person is in any way attractive to you, like that is appealing for you. Yeah.
What about if someone has heard a bit about TA, doesn't know very much, but wants to know, so Beatrice, why should I even explore TA? What is so good about TA that I should explore?
I had a wonderful summer, and I did a lot of things with TA people this summer. So partly because we are one heck of a community with beautiful people in it. So there we go again. Like, we had so much fun with each other, and it was so lovely to meet each other. And it is lovely to meet each other online and to have these international relationship all over the world. I really, really think that is a very special piece of TA quality for me, to be with different cultures and to talk about who you are and what you want in life and how you relate to others. So that's one of the things. But I do want to say also that I think that 10 years ago, I had a different relationship with my husband and my 3 sons and with my parents and with my friends and with my siblings. And it's not like everything is brilliant now, but I have been developing into such a lovely way of relating in so many ways. I keep saying that I've got 3 beautiful sons, but they really are beautiful also because I know TA, because I could contract with them about things that were quite difficult. And I can relate with them in a way that is so based upon I am and you are, which is such a good thing in pedagogy. If you don't know all the answers, but you do know that you are and I am, and here we are together. So that's why you should go into TA. So dive into it for that reason.
I think that's a lovely way to bring the podcast to a conclusion. I'd love to go on talking. And also we respect that our listeners have a finite length of dog walk or whatever it might be to listen to the episode. So we bring it to a conclusion. Before we close, Beatrice, anything else you want to say from your point of view to wrap this particular episode of the TA podcast up?
I thought it was lovely talking to you guys about it. And it is true, we could talk more. I'd be interested to be more into conversation and to have some provoking thought sharing. That would be good. Yeah. But I really enjoyed what we did. Thank you.
Thank you from me.
Yeah, and thank you from me too for the conversation that we shared together.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave us a review. Leaving a review allows more people to discover the podcast, so you can scroll down to the ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts and click Write a Review. If you haven't already, please follow us wherever you get your podcasts from. We're available on all major podcast platforms. For more information, you can visit our website, www.tapodcast.com, or follow on all the usual social media platforms. This podcast is brought to you in partnership with the United Kingdom Association for Transactional Analysis, the European Association for Transactional Analysis, and our wonderful Patreon supporters.